Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
It's week 5 in the NFL. Your fantasy league is starting to take shape. The winners and the losers are starting to separate themselves. Now is not the time for you to miss this show. This is the Fantasy Greek, starts and sits in 60 minutes. I am Keith Greek from 87sportsfans.com, and I am joined, as always, by the namesake of the show, the Fantasy Greek himself, Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com. Jim, happy week 5.
Keith, happy week 5 to you, too. Glad to be here, and I only have 6 words for you, and they are Cubs win, Cubs win, Cubs win.
Wow. See, this is so I get to sit through this tonight, folks, but no one will be around me Friday night if the Mets win. And I'll have nobody to rub anybody's face in then.
Oh. You're a Mets fan?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
There we go.
If you cut me, Jim, I bleed blue and orange.
Ooh.
It's that bad. So.
Oh, and that's why you're a Bears fan as well. I got it. It works.
I figured out that when I started watching sports in the 80s when I was coming of age, all the teams that were good they were kind of a-holes. I mean, the 85 Bears, the 86 Mets, and the Lakers were all Showtime. Nobody liked them. Those are my 3 big favorite teams. So I don't know what that says about me, but.
So are you trying to say that you live amongst the people that like to be disliked?
Apparently, I don't mind.
Oh, but you're so likable, Keith.
Well, I know at least one person that would disagree with you. So we're not going to get into that right now. That is a story for off air during the break.
I want to get my meter running so I can charge you.
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't think it was you, but apparently there's 2 people that would disagree.
I'm still going to charge you.
All right. So last week, we're limited on time here, folks, but I just want to say, Joe Philbin getting fired. Wow. Not that I can't say I disagree with the move, but after week 4, that just impresses me in the wrong way. Just to make a change like that, and now apparently Dan Campbell is kicking butt and taking names in Miami. So it remains to be seen what happens there. But it makes them kind of hard to predict and what to say. What is your take from a fantasy guru perspective on the Dolphins?
Well, and here's the thing. Any team that goes through this kind of upheaval so early in the season does not bode well for them on a reality platform, meaning, if you want to believe that the Dolphins are going to make the playoffs, I would say that's wishful thinking at this point. I mean, I don't see things turning themselves around overnight. I could be wrong. They come out of they're going to have the bye week. They'll have plenty of time to prepare for their next game. But these sorts of things, we've seen it before where coaches quit early on and things just don't work.
See,
it's as if everybody's giving up on the season today.
I was listening to the radio broadcast of that game, and the Dolphins had some life in the third quarter. Like they were attempting. They could have come back at one point. They were moving the ball, and the broadcast, the play-by-play announcers were saying that there was no kind of vibe. Nobody was up on the Dolphins sidelines. They all seemed kind of relaxed, and I thought to myself, well, that team's quit. If they can't get up and into this game in week 4 already, then the coach has lost that team. And then sure enough, the coach is given an opportunity to work someplace else. The other story I wanted to say from last week before we get into this week, it was kind of a funny story, is that my wife is in our fantasy league, and I'm in your league as well. Mm-hmm. And both of us were playing owners that had Calvin Johnson. Mm-hmm. And they were both close games, both within 6 points. So if Calvin Johnson scores that touchdown at the end, we both would have lost our matchup. So with one Cam Chancellor punch, it was a happy household. That's all I'm going to say.
Apparently, according to ESPN, 20 in 20,000 leagues, that last play affected whether or not a team won or lost.
Wow. What was that number?
Like 20,000. It's
20?
just something ridiculous. I mean, it was on ESPN, whatever their fantasy show is.
Wow.
Our buddy Matthew Berry reported it, so I assume it to be true.
Wow. All right, so folks, here's how it works. We're going to go through all the Week 5 matchups game by game and give you all the fantasy insight for those matchups. If you have any specific lineup questions, the phone number to call in is 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. And if you are happening to catching this program on demand, if you're one of those listeners, you can also get up-to-the-minute advice through Twitter and tweet at the hashtag AskTFG. That's AskTFG. All right, the first game on our docket is the Thursday night game. Makes sense. The Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. The Texans are a mess again. Bill O'Brien going back and forth between quarterbacks last week. Apparently, Ryan Mallett is still the starter, even though Brian Hoyer didn't play all that bad numbers-wise, even though the Falcons were not really trying all that hard at that point. The Falcons beating the Texans last week 48-21. The Colts with Matt Hasselbeck under center because of Andrew Luck's questionable shoulder, and there is one body part on a quarterback you do not want to be questionable, it's the shoulder, other than the head, I guess. Hasselbeck guides them to a 3-point win against Jacksonville at home. So going forward, this game is in Houston. The Colts started out 0-2. Andrew Luck is supposed to play. That's what they said. I haven't had the best luck with trusting injury reports this year so far. But they say that Andrew Luck is going to play. This game is on, in Houston. Ryan Mallett, who I was big on early, I'm just not that big on now. But the difference is that the Texans play much better defense than the Colts. I'm actually going to pick the Texans in this game.
Wow, I'm going to take the Colts in this game. I'm not a believer in that Texans defense like I was at the beginning of the season. They have lost too many games to teams that, if you believe the hype, the preseason hype, not just mine, Sammy Bassett's, a bunch of other people that thought, the Texans would have that dominating defense. They just haven't done it. They haven't even shown up. The defense right now, in terms of the rush, they're much better than the pass. But in terms of the pass, they're giving up what are they giving up? 228 yards, 7 TDs, 115 rush yards, 5 TDs. And this is per game. Well, not the TDs. I mean, you take the average of that. But it's not good. So I'm going to take the Colts, regardless of whether it's Matt Hasselbeck, if it's Andrew Luck, which all indications are it is. This is a winnable game for them. I can't say that they'll win going away. Some people believe that they will. But from a fantasy perspective, if Andrew Luck's active, I think you got to play him. I mean, unless your second next quarterback is Peyton Manning, I just can't see benching him even in this matchup. Frank Gore is a must start against the Texans defense, giving up the 6th most fantasy points to the position. I think you should feel confident he'll come in at 100-plus yards and a score. Keep Dante Moncrief and T.Y. Hilton active as wide receiver 2s. Interesting. This is very interesting. Andre Johnson, this is his first game against his old team. Some people actually believe because of that makes people an instant start. Could I see the Colts going out of their way to drop a TD to Andre Johnson? Yes. But is he going to do it more, get over 50 yards receiving? I just don't know. I mean, he has just not done well in this offense. It's as if the Colts realized, hey, we really didn't need him, but we got him, so I guess he's got to get on the field. I would be hesitant to play him myself personally, but in a deeper league, he's worth giving a flyer to. The Colts DST is an option against Ryan Mallett, who I think that's the wrong call, period, for the Texans. Brian Hoyer is the guy to have in there. Must start. Arian Foster, he's back. Didn't have a very impressive game last week, but I think with having that under his belt, a full week of practice, he'll be good to go. DeAndre Hopkins, he is a must start. He will be highly targeted, particularly because Cecil Shorts and Nate Washington are going to be out this week. I mean, it's amazing. Their number 2, number 3 receiver gone. DeAndre Hopkins should get huge targets. And if you're looking for a sleeper, if you're desperate for a play, check out rookie Keith Mumphrey. He's going to get the start. He'll get it ahead of Jalen Strong because he's been healthy. And, I mean, he's a guy that could be targeted over 8 times easily and put some points on the board, so go check that out. Texans DST only in deeper leagues. I'm taking the Colts, Keith. I don't know what you're seeing those Texans, but, man,
it's not
good
so
luck.
It's not so much what I see in the Texans is that I don't like Indianapolis' defense at all.
Yeah, but against Ryan Mallett?
I know. I look, and it's at home.
Okay.
They get
the crowd scores a touchdown for them? Okay, let's move on.
Home games mean something in the NFL.
Okay.
It's enough to add 3 points to the point spread.
Okay.
Just saying. The Washington Redskins at the Atlanta Falcons. Hey, guess what, guys? The Redskins aren't all that bad. I wouldn't call them a good team, but they're not all that bad. 10th in the league in points allowed. The problem is that they don't score many points. And that is going to be a problem against the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm not ready to say that their defense is back, but they are middle of the road in allowing points. But guess what? The Redskins' defense is even better. So what's the deal here? Well, you know what? The Atlanta Falcons are playing really good offensive football here. They're third in the league in points scored. If you look at the 87 Sports Fans power rankings that were released yesterday, the Falcons are number 3 in the league right there. That's rarefied air, folks. It takes something to hit that top 5 on those rankings. I'm picking the Falcons.
Yeah, I don't know how you can't pick the Falcons in this game. I mean, they have just been dominant since the season started, and it seems like they're getting better with each passing week, especially on defense. I love them at home. I don't know, I mean, you can't look at Kirk Cousins and be impressed by his body of work, even though he won last week. You have to like what the Falcons defense has been doing. From a fantasy perspective, the Redskins don't have much to offer in terms of plays this week. I think Pierre Garçon is solid. He's the go-to guy right now with Deshaun Jackson out. He's sort of a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, so if you have him, you're likely going to play him. I like Alfred Morris only because the Falcons are actually giving up the most fantasy points allowed, 85 yards rushing, but here's the kicker, 7 rushing TDs on the season. So Morris, going against a tough defense, is going to do you something, but he's got to kick in that touchdown. I think he'll get it. So get him in there, get him as an RB2. But at that point, you have to sit there and say, well, why are the Falcons giving up the most fantasy points if they're only allowing 85 yards rushing and 7 TDs? That's because they're giving up a lot through the air. If you're the Redskins, you want to be smart about this. I like Chris Thompson as a sleeper this week. For the Redskins, he's their receiving running back. If you're in a deep league, I would play him. If you're in a shallow league, like 10 or 12 teams, there's no need to even consider him and take the risk, but otherwise go ahead. For the Falcons, Matt Ryan might not have his best game of the season, but it'll still be solid. Last week, Sam Bradford put up 3 TDs on this defense. I can't see why Matt Ryan can't do it either. Julio Jones must start. Leonard Hankerson has replaced Roddy White as the number 2 wide receiver on this team until further notice. So you get Leonard Hankerson started. He's been a stud the last couple of weeks. Roddy White has done nothing. I mean, literally nothing in 2 weeks, even though he's taken the field. This is a true test for running back Devonta Freeman. If he's the stud that I think he is, he's going to put up another monster game. You keep him started, even though this Redskins team is the number 1 rushing defense in fantasy. Keep Devonta Freeman started. And if you need some help, go ahead and go with the Falcons DST. They very well may be, by the end of this season, a top 5 defense. Falcons win. Rise up, Atlanta. Rise up.
The Cleveland Browns traveled to the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams 1-3, shockingly enough for the Ravens. The Browns still have Josh McCown as their quarterback, which, it is what it is. The real disappointing part of the Browns for me is their defense. They're 21st in the league in points allowed. They're 31st in the league in rushing yards per game. Now, enter the Baltimore Ravens, who don't run the ball that much or that well anymore. Thank you, Mark Trestman. They had a big year from Justin Forsett, and he is now completely in the tank. The Ravens are 19th in the league in rushing yards per game. Something's got to give here. The Ravens are not as bad as 1-3. I think the Browns are as bad as 1-3. This game is in Baltimore. I'm picking the Ravens.
Yeah, you have to expect a dominant performance from the Ravens coming off a huge Week 4 win over the Steelers, where their defense was actually pretty darn good. I agree with you. I think Mark Trestman has wasted Justin Forsett, at least for the first 3 weeks of the season. Last week, Justin Forsett, 150 yards rushing. I think he'll get you 100 plus a TD this week. I basically think Coach Harbaugh walked down the hallway, knocked on Mark's door, and said, "You need to get this guy active because we cannot constantly be relying on Steve Smith to do the good on this team." And for that reason, Steve Smith's not playing this week due to injury. Joe Flacco makes for a decent start this week against a pass defense, giving up the 6th most fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. You have to consider Kamar Aiken as a wide receiver 3 this week to a pass defense, giving up the 11th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And just so you know the real numbers to that's 264 yards and 9 TDs on the season. Crockett Gilmore could be a good play if he's active, but I don't see that. For the Browns, Josh McCown, this is not a bad start for him. I mean, the Ravens were tough last week, but before last week, they were giving up a whole bunch of yards through there, like 250, and that includes 7 TDs. So McCown is an option if you're in a deep league or have bye week issues or injury issues, or any kind of quarterback issues, because we've had plenty of them these last few weeks. I would avoid Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson if you can. The Ravens' rush defense is one of the best against running backs. Duke Johnson might be the slightly better play, but I don't know that either of these two guys are going to make the kind of noise that you saw last week against the Chargers. And an absolute must sit is Browns tight end Gary Barnidge. I know he's done some great things the last 2 weeks, but the Ravens are number 1 against tight ends. I don't even think they're allowing a fantasy point a week to the position. So you just need to move on. Start the Ravens defense. Ravens win.
The Seattle Seahawks at the Cincinnati Bengals. This is one of the premier matchups, if not the premier matchup of the week, if you ask me. Because the Seahawks, I know they're 2-2, but they have been a different team since Cam Chancellor has rejoined the team after week 2. You know what the difference is with those 2 games, kids? They were at home with the 12th man in their pocket. Now they travel to Cincinnati, a team that is playing fantastic football. Yes, they are the number 2 team in the 87 Sports Fans power rankings. So what's going to give here? Is Andy Dalton going to stare the Seahawks defense down in the face and perform to the point where the Bengals come away winners at home? You bet he is, kids. And you know what? Not so much Andy Dalton, but that Bengals defense is going to chew up a atrocious Seattle offensive line. The Seahawks couldn't put away the Lions. Could not put away the Lions offensively last week on Monday Night Football. Cincinnati is not Detroit this year on offense. They are executing on all cylinders. I'm taking the Bengals.
Wow, that was a pretty boy. You thrashed the Seahawks.
You know what? They are phenomenal on defense. That offensive line is atrocious.
Okay, well, I guess I'll take your word for that. I think the Bengals make for a good start as well. The Seahawks have given up a ton of fantasy points to opposing defenses, but I wouldn't count the Seahawks out of this game. I think it'll be a high-scoring game just because Andy Dalton is going to throw the football because the Seahawks look like they're going to shut down the Bengals running game. Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard do not make for the strongest starts this week. I think you have to keep Hill in as an RB2 unless you really have a better option. And even then, you're going to keep him in as a flex. And Gio Bernard might actually be the slightly better play because the Bengals should be passing the football a little bit more. Look for A.J. Green to have a hard time this week, just like Calvin Johnson did. Is he a worthwhile play? Yes, especially in 3-receiver leagues. Is he going to score? That's harder to say. But what happens then is that Marvin Johnson becomes a much better play. Even Mohamed Sanu sort of becomes a super sleeper this week, even though I'm not running out to get him in any of my leagues, but you might need the help. So go ahead and do that. Tyler Eifert must start. The Seahawks are giving up the 12th most fantasy points to tight end, so you go ahead and get him active. For the Seahawks, start Russell Wilson. You start Doug Baldwin. The Bengals' pass defense is it's very middle of the road. We're talking about 280 yards passing allowed per game and 2 TDs per game. Is that worthwhile to start this guys? You bet. Jimmy Graham, start him. It seems like every other game he's putting up something fantasy relevant. This is the week for him to do that. And then you start that Seahawks defense. It is the best in the league. And Thomas Rawls, look, if Marshawn Lynch were starting, I would start him. With Thomas Rawls, it's a little bit different. He's a traditional running back. He runs. He doesn't really receive. And these Bengals, they may not be number one against the position, but in terms of rushing, they're only allowing 85 yards in the ground. And guess how many TDs? Guess, Keith?
0.
You got it. So Thomas Rawls would be a guy to avoid if you can. Bengals should be 5-0, Keith.
Wow, we're agreeing on that pick. I thought we were going to differ on that one for sure. I really did.
In that case, I see home field advantage with such a dominant team to really work in their favor.
Oh, so sometimes it works and sometimes.
Yep.
All right, so St. Louis travels to Green Bay. Now this is a game I was tempted to go against what all common sense was telling me in picking this game. But let me tell you something, kids. Green Bay, for all of Aaron Rodgers' lore and everything like that, and give them credit, they're third in the league in points. Sixth in the league in points scored, and the Packers are fourth in our power rankings. You know what, kids? They're third in the league in rushing yards per game. You don't really think about that when you think about the Packers, but you know what? They are grounding and pounding. They still don't defend the run that well, but that's okay. The Rams haven't run the ball really well, but maybe that will change with the presence of Todd Gurley. Last week, 19 rushes for 146 yards. Welcome to the league, kid, and an upset win over the Cardinals in Arizona for the Rams, and that is huge, and that is what's kind of piquing my interest that maybe the Rams can pull this out, but there is no way I'm picking against the Packers at home. They've only allowed 71 points. That's good for third in the league this year. I'm taking the Packers.
Yeah, there is no way this Rams team can offensively keep up with the Packers. I mean, you could sit here and tout the Rams defense as much as you want, but at the end of the day, this is a very high-potent Packers passing offense. And what's even better, the Rams rush defense is just not very good. So you're looking at Eddie Lacy, and he's a must-start this week. I mean, the Rams are giving up the 8th most fantasy points against the position, and what that means is besides 120 yards rushing and 3 rushing TDs, they're giving up more through the air. So Eddie Lacy's a must-start. The Packers should control this game on the ground, which means Aaron Rodgers will get all the time in the world to be throwing to his guys. Aaron Rodgers must start. Randall Cobb must start. James Jones must start. And start the Packers defense against Nick Foles. I can't see Nick Foles having 2 consecutive decent games on behalf of the Rams. It just isn't going to happen. This is a Packers defense that's very proud. It's very stout, and they're going to play at a high level at home. For the Rams, Todd Gurley. Oh, my God, 160 all-purpose yards in his first game with 20-plus touches. Are you kidding me? Packers aren't going to stop this guy. This guy is just that good. You keep him active and let it go. Coaches' decisions or players you might, maybe you can play him, maybe you shouldn't. Kenny Britt, I kind of doesn't get me excited this week. Tavon Austin, yeah, he could be pretty good. I'd rather have him in a daily fantasy game or in a 14 or 16 team league, but other than that, it just doesn't get me excited. Rams defense, nope. Nick Foles, nope. Packers win.
The Chicago Bears travel to the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams at 1-3. The Bears beating the Raiders in a dramatic fashion last week, 22-20 on a last-moment field goal by Robbie Gould, and then held on for dear life as the Raiders lateraled the ball 206 times and almost made something out of nothing, but let's not get crazy here. The Kansas City Chiefs, on the other hand, lost to the Bengals in Cincinnati, 36-21, failing to score a touchdown in the entire game. See, this isn't a battle of a contender that's struggling versus a bad team. The Kansas City Chiefs are a bad team, and you're going to say, "Hey, Heath, you're out of your mind." No, they are a bad team. But the Bears, give them credit where credit is due. They are not the defensive patsy that they were last year. They're 4th in the league in defensive passing yards per game at 189. They still struggle with running the ball, but they've trailed a lot, and other teams have been trying to control the clock on them. So I'm not sure how much of that weighs into that and kind of slants that. The good news for Bears fans is that the Chiefs are dead. Well, they're not dead last, but they're 28th in the league in passing yards allowed per game, 295. Jay Cutler looked okay with a tender hamstring against the Raiders last week. What's he going to look like against this Chiefs defense? They've also given up 125 points this year so far. same exact amount as the Bears. So the Bears have an opportunity to actually put some points on the board, even though they still will probably be without Alshon Jeffrey, because who can trust John Fox's injury report anymore? Jermon Bushrod is listed as questionable with a concussion. Center Will Montgomery out for the year, but they shuffled that offensive line. And Patrick Omameh, the guard that came in to play for Matt Slauson, who was shifted over to center, I hope somebody got him a game ball, because he played absolutely admirably and was a big reason why they were able to win against the Raiders last week. So the Bears going to Kansas City, and you know what, kids? They drive Kansas City to 1-4. I'm picking the Bears on the road in this game, in Arrowhead. I'm picking them. I'm doing it. Cuddy does it.
Oh, my God. You're only doing this because of our conversation before we went on the air. Just because I said I think they can win this game.
I'm
just get out.
This is a winnable game.
Oh, all right. Look, to the listeners out there, I think the Bears can win this game, but I still got to stick with the Chiefs. Keith actually mentioned in his game review this past week in the Bears-Raiders game. And one of the interesting issues here is now here's how home field advantage can help the Chiefs. Is the Bears are going to a place that's going to be very hostile, very loud, loudest stadium in the entire NFL. And my concern is you've got these guys with a lot of pride playing at home, going against a team that, they're upstarts right now. The fact that they won last week and the fact that they could win this week makes them upstarts. So I like the Chiefs at home. I don't in our game winner table in the Skybox area for the fantasygreek.com, I've given this game the least confidence point I could possibly give it, because I agree with you. I think there's a chance the Bears can pull this out, but I'm not willing to, at the end of the day, say, yes, that's going to happen. From a fantasy perspective, obviously you like Jamal Charles, Jeremy Maclin, Travis Kelce. You keep these guys started against a Bears pass defense, which is stingy in terms of yardage, only allowing 190 yards through the air, but gives up a boatload of TDs. 10 passing TDs, 2 rushing TDs. Somehow they're going to pop the ball into the end zone through these 3 guys, maybe all of them, who knows. But for the Bears, God, this Chiefs defense, which started so good to start the season, is now terrible. They're giving up 295 yards passing, 11 TDs, as Keith mentioned. In fantasy, that means the most fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers. So Jay Cutler is the start this week. I mean, if you've got these injury issues that we discussed, or he's your backup or a bye week issue, Jay Cutler is startable. Matt Forte is obviously a must-start. Martellus Bennett is definitely a must-start. Alshon Jeffrey, I think he'll miss this week, but if he were active, I would say he'd be a must-start. But let's assume he's not going to play. Eddie Royal's a great play. I like him as sort of a low-end wide receiver 3, definitely a flex play. You could even go to Marcus Wilson if you had to. I think this will be an interesting game, and I actually think there's going to be a bunch of points scored in it, mostly through the Bears, and Jamal Charles should have a huge game. Chiefs win.
All right, New Orleans Saints travel to the Philadelphia Eagles. Drew Brees came back from injury last week to pass for 33 of 41 for 359 yards and 2 touchdowns, beating the Cowboys 26-20. The Eagles dropped to 1-3. With a 3-point loss to the Washington Redskins, 23-20. You got to love Chip Kelly's moxie. He went all in on this year. Unfortunately, it is blowing up in his face. Hardcore right now. The Saints, you don't know what to make of them. They look like they're showing flashes of the old Saints, but this is not that team. They need to be different. They did have to go to overtime to beat an undermanned Cowboys team. Let's make sure we mention that. And the wheel route to C.J. Spiller in overtime was fantastic for the highlight reel, but doesn't really scream a really solid team. The Eagles are as hit or miss as anybody this year. If you're trying to figure out what's going on with them, good luck. The question is, which defense do you trust more? And I don't trust the Saints at all. I'm going to pick the Eagles in this game at home.
Yeah, I think you have to, and for lots of reasons. But the big one being what you point out: the Saints' defense. They've not been good. They're giving up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. they're number 21 against the wide receivers, which I found interesting. But that seems to suggest that they're a little bit more friendlier to the tight ends and to the running backs than they are to wide receivers. So be it. I do like Drew Brees this week. Yeah, that was a pretty good game I thought he had last week, and he had a couple scores, so he should be able to do the same against the Eagles. You got to keep Brandon Cooks active if you still have him on your roster. I like Willie Snead this week. He's shown enough the last few weeks to show he's a consistent threat, and I think Drew Brees will find it a little bit easier with every passing week to hit him in the red zone. Mark Ingram, I have him as sort of an option, but he's not really an option. You're going to play him. He's either your number 1 or number 2 running back. It's hard not to. It's just that the Eagles have been pretty tough against running backs, allowing just under 100 yards rushing and just 1 TD on the season. But Mark Ingram, I mean, you just kind of have to let him go unless you clearly have a better option. We got to comment on the Eagles' rushing game. I mean, it's a mess. You look at DeMarco Murray and his fantasy points; they're not. If you have him, you're not confident about him. If you're playing him crossing your fingers every week and praying to God that he does something for you to help you win, because there's just no guarantee. Ryan Matthews, in my estimation, is probably the better running back between the two in this offense. And then Darren Sproles at any given time could do some damage. But, if he's on your team, you don't know when to start him. I mean, you've got no guarantee. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel for you. And if you've got DeMarco Murray, you're probably going to play him. If you got the other guys, keep him benched this week. If you have the Eagles' defense, I think they're a startable defense this week in a game at home, borderline top 10, Eagles at home.
All right, and that we are at the halfway point here. We will take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hit the second half of the schedule. You're listening to the Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes here on Late Night Sports Radio. .com 585-633-7487 or tweet to the hashtag AskTFG. We'll be right back, folks.
Maybe I could offer up an
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Ready? 1. You will do this 4 times with the left, 4 with the right, then 8 times with both, then repeat.
The Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes. It's the Week 5 edition, kids, and we have a tweet that we want to address to the hashtag AskTFG. J. Eugene Bennett, at J. Eugene Bennett tweets about a trade proposal in his league. He'll give up T.Y. Hilton, Latavius Murray, and Amir Abdullah for T.J. Yeldon and DeAndre Hopkins. Jim, is that a go or a no-go?
Wait, say that again? I'm sorry. I was having an out-of-body experience.
We talked about this during the break.
We did?
We set this up. The trade proposal.
Oh, yeah, no, don't do it. That's crazy. I just, I hear trade proposals. It's just crazy. I mean, why would you give up 2 pretty good running backs for? And I'm not. T.J. Yeldon's a good running back. I just, and Hilton might be struggling, but unless this is really messing up your team, it seems too one-sided. You're giving up way too much for 2 players. I don't understand it. And what I was saying to you, Keith, was it makes more sense when you trade a high running back and a low wide receiver for a high wide receiver and a low running back. Those kinds of deals work really well, I think. When you're sort of taking blocks of teams and switching them, they're so contingent upon – I mean, everybody's reacting to today, and we all want to know what the future says, and we do our best to prognosticate it, but you just never really know. And at the end of the day – I always tell people, look, you got to give something up to get something. And if you really feel that's the case here, I mean, you're going to do the trade regardless of what I think. But just from seeing this on paper, I'd say no. I would keep T.Y. Hilton, Latavius Murray, and Amir Abdullah.
All right, so there you have it. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
All right. Next game up on the schedule, Jacksonville at Tampa Bay. Both teams 1-3, and boy, is Jameis Winston ever looking the rookie. A rough outing last week. Jacksonville comes to town. Blake Bortles has shown signs. He's got a 6-3 touchdown interception ratio so far this year, so directionally correct. However, the Jaguars just don't score many points, and neither do the Buccaneers. If you are sitting at someone's house watching football this Sunday and they have this game on, you are either a Jaguars or a Buccaneers fan, because there is no reason anybody should want to watch this game at all. It's going to be that bad. I'm picking the Buccaneers at home because they have a stingy pass defense, and the Jaguars don't really run the ball all that well. And that is all I have to go on. The rookie quarterback and all, I am going to pick Tampa Bay.
I'm going the other way. I'm taking the Jaguars on the road here. I think I've seen enough from Blake Bortles to know that he's a pretty decent young quarterback, fully capable of the 250-yard passing game, 2 TDs. I like T.J. Yeldon this week against the Buccaneers team, giving up the 10th most fantasy points to the position in particular, 136 yards and 1 TD per game. That's some really good stuff. I understand the Buccaneers are more stingy in the pass defense, but only insofar as yards, where it's 185 yards. But they're giving up 8 TDs, which means they are once that ball gets in the red zone, they're a team that just cannot stop their opponents. And I really do like Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns this week as wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. You get those guys active. For the Buccaneers, start Mike Evans, start Vincent Jackson. They're both fully capable of getting plenty of targets, plenty of receptions. The question is who's going to get the TDs. I even like Doug Martin this week against the Jaguars team, giving up 83 yards and 1 TD per game. I think that's a good game for him, given the circumstances that they have there at the Jaguars. And you might even want to consider Charles Sims as a flex. But when all is said and done, I think the Jaguars team is just better. Their defense, I think, is startable in fantasy because right now Jameis Winston is making way too many mistakes. And until that changes, the Buccaneers are going to suffer. Jags win.
The Buffalo Bills travel to the Tennessee Titans. If you can find a beat on the Bills and know what the hell's going on, good for you. Call Rex Ryan, because I don't think anybody really knows. 2-2 in both games. I really thought both games they lost. While the Patriots, I thought that it would at least be closer than it was. But I thought that this game against the Giants in Buffalo was a winnable game, and they went out and laid an absolute egg. Tip your cap to the Giants for pulling off the 24-10 win on the road. The Tennessee Titans lost a heartbreaker to the Colts their last game 2 weeks ago. They're coming off a bye this week, giving up 21 fourth quarter points, 35-33. The loss, the final score in that tally. Marcus Mariota has looked, fairly decent. He's taking care of the ball, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions on the year. But the problem here with Tennessee is they just can't seem to put it all together. I mean, you look at the numbers, the stats, and they're not a bad team. They give up more points than probably you'd want them to. But with Buffalo, how do we know what to expect from this team? I mean, we have no idea, and they give up a ton of passing yards. God, am I really going to do this? I'm going to do this, guys. I'm going to pick Tennessee to win this game at home.
I don't think that's as crazy as you might think it is. You brought up a lot of nice points about the Titans. I think something that's very helpful for them is the fact that they're coming out of their bye week, so they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. But I'm going to stick with the Bills, and I'm sticking with the Bills because of a more dominant defense, and quite frankly, I think the better quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, who last week, if the 2 touchdowns, one that he threw for and one that he rushed for, weren't called back because of personal fouls on the part of his offensive line, which is just crazy, Tyrod Taylor would be a top 3 quarterback right now in most fantasy football settings. I'm not scared of the Titans' defense under these circumstances. I think the Bills' defense is a good start against Marcus Mariota. He is a rookie after all. Percy Harvin's your best option in terms of the receiving game. Charles Clay has become an instant must-start among tight ends. I think he's a top 3 option this week. He also would have had, I think, a second TD last week. He is highly targeted. I think he's on 30 targets on the season, which is top 3 amongst all tight ends in the NFL. So go that route with your Bills. With your Titans, start Marcus Mariota. Look, the Bills are giving up close to 300 yards per game and 10 TDs on the season. There's a lot of upside here for him. This should be a good to decent game. So right now I have him as a quarterback 2, but obviously he can fill in the various circumstances, whether it be matchup, injury, or bye weeks for you. Kendall Wright is a great start this week. He's not heavily targeted amongst wide receivers. He's doing a lot with his yardage. Plus he's got a couple of scores. Look for him to do some damage this week against the Bills. Delaney Walker, before the bye week, actually had a normal game. He had 80 receiving yards, 89 receiving yards. It looks like he's back from injury, and Marcus Mariota is using him. Dorial Green-Beckham is sort of a super sleeper. I like him as a red zone target, if you're in one of these deeper leagues. But, he'll just get you a few yards and a TD, and if that's enough for you, go ahead and give him a start. Running backs, I try to avoid these guys. They've got 3 now battling for touches, and it's not good. None of them are really standing out, and if Ken Weisenhunt just wants them to all battle, well, you know what? Let him do that. You avoid them. And, again, as far as taking a team for this game, I'm picking the Bills.
All right, the Arizona Cardinals at the Detroit Lions. The Cardinals losing a heartbreaker last week to the Rams at home. My favorite story in the wake of that was Bruce Arians in the locker room just kind of said, didn't say a word and said, remember how this feels. How losing feels. I like little stories like that. I love Bruce Arians as a coach in the last couple of years watching him in Arizona. Detroit, on the other hand, is a pile of hot garbage. They really are. They're pretty good defensively. They don't give up a whole ton of points, but this offense with Matt Stafford, with Calvin Johnson, with Eric Ebron, they cannot score points. They are atrocious. Arizona is leading the league in point differential right now, 75 points. Is the difference between them and their opponents. Yes, I know some of that was helped by playing a bad Bears team in week 2, but it is what it is. I am taking the Cardinals.
I'm taking the Cardinals too, and unlike you, I don't feel that the Lions defense is that great. I mean, they were awesome in primetime, don't get me wrong, but in their other 3 games, they weren't good because they're giving up the 11th and 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers respectively. That turns out to be 270 yards and 2 TDs per game. Not good. They're a little bit better in the running game, but it's still slightly better than 100 rushing yards and roughly a little bit over one rushing TD per game. So that's not so good either. The Cardinals can attack all those things. So Carson Palmer must start. Larry Fitzgerald must start. Cardinals DST must start. Chris Johnson, I think you got to start him. He seems to be the running back you could look at confidently and say he's going to get your 10 to 15 touches. Now, what Bruce Arians is going to do with the rest of the touches for the running backs between Andre Ellington, who's supposed to play this week, and David Johnson remains to be seen. I suppose if you had to pick between the two, it would be Andre Ellington for the flex play. If you had David Johnson and you had to play him, I guess you got to play him. It's nothing you can do. In terms of any other wide receivers, John Brown, this is not a bad. He's actually been pretty consistent, 60 to 80 yards. He's just not getting a TD for you. Eventually, that's going to change, and there's nothing wrong with that happening this week against the Lions. For the Lions, I would say Matt Stafford is a quarterback to bench. This Cardinals team is very stingy against the position, ranked third, 199 pass yards, 5 pass TDs on the season. The Lions defense, I wouldn't play them. I mean, last week was a fluke. If anybody was playing them in fantasy football, I'm stunned. But players to play, Calvin Johnson, because he's such an all-around threat, heavily targeted. You can see him going for 100 yards, and whether he scores or not is really the issue. Amir Abdullah is a persistent threat, and so long as Joique Bell stays sidelined or doesn't play up to how he's played the last 2 seasons, Amir Abdullah should be the man. Eric Ebron likely won't play this week. Golden Tate, I think, is a rough play. He's just not gotten it together in this offense, and he struggled as Matt Stafford has struggled. Cardinals should be 5-0 too, Keith.
The New England Patriots.
Or wait, no, 4-1. 4-1. I'm sorry.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
The New England Patriots travel to the Dallas Cowboys. Patriots undefeated, coming off a bye. The Dallas Cowboys still have Brandon Weeden as their quarterback. And, you know, with DeMarco Murray leaving in the offseason, I've said it before that you could put anybody behind that offensive line and they should be able to run the ball. But the Cowboys are just averaging 107 yards a game. That's good for 16th in the league. And part of that is that the run blocking has not been all that stellar. The Patriots with Tom Brady first in the league in passing yards per game, and the Cowboys 19th in the league in pass defense per game. That is not a good matchup. I don't like the way this fits. And even though it's in Dallas, I'm going to pick the Patriots to win this game.
Yeah, I don't know how you go against the Patriots, against the Cowboys. Their defense, while good, and actually it'll be coming together this week. They're going to get their main guys back. They're getting Greg Hardy back, and what's that linebacker defensive end's name?
McLean?
I believe so, yeah. They're going to be the best that they've been all season long. And still, you look at the Patriots go, well, they've had 2 weeks to prepare. They should, I think, run circles around them. And even if they don't run circles around them, it should still be pretty good, given the fact that they're taking on a Cowboys offense that's missing Tony Romo. So, you start Tom Brady. You start Julian Edelman, you start Rob Gronkowski, you start the Patriots defense if you need help. They're more of a borderline top 10 defense this week. I think you got to start Deion Lewis and LeGarrette Blount. The Cowboys should be better defensively, but they've given up the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position, despite only 91 yards rushing. What that means is that you can throw the football to a running back and he's going to do some damage. So you got to like Deion Lewis as a must-start this week. LeGarrette Blount is sort of a closer, get his yardage in the second half of the game. For the Cowboys, Joseph Randle should be a good play against the Patriots. Rush defense still susceptible to the run at roughly a little bit over 100 yards and a TD per game. Jason Witten must start. He's still heavily targeted by Brandon Weeden. And I like Terrence Williams. I mean, if they fall behind as anticipated, the Cowboys will have to air the football out. And because of that, Terrence Williams should follow up last week's performance where he scored a TD with another week's performance where he scored a TD or 2. And then I think if there's something that, if you're a fantasy football person that really likes to look ahead, let's pay attention this week to Darren McFadden and Christine Michael, and let's see how the Cowboys use them. With Lance Dunbar out of action, somebody really needs to step up into his space where he had a couple weeks ago 10 receptions for 100 yards rushing, because until Tony Romo gets back, the Cowboys could really use a running back of that style. Whoever fills that this week, I think will end up being a waiver wire ad in Week 6.
The Denver Broncos travel to the Oakland Raiders, and the 4-0 Broncos, but not because of the quarterback. Say it with me, kids. Peyton Manning's really old. Look, he's not. I wouldn't call him bad, but it is what it is. 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. This is not your dad's Peyton Manning, right? You go to Pro Football Focus and you look at quarterbacks this season and rank them just by passing plays, their performance on passing plays. Peyton Manning is 27th in the league right now. He's worse than Eli. He's worse than Sam Bradford. He's worse than Blake Bortles. Yes, Jay Cutler is 14th. Just put that in perspective here, kids. Peyton Manning is not leading anybody anymore, especially if he's throwing interceptions like that. The story about the Denver Broncos here, kids, is their defense. First in passing yards allowed per game, 8th in rushing yards allowed per game, 2nd in points allowed. The Raiders, Derek Carr, like I've said week after week, he is the quarterback of the future, but he just runs into a tough get this week, and I'm picking Denver on the road.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't go with Denver here. And Keith, for all this poo-hooing you're giving on Peyton Manning being too old and not being the same Peyton Manning, I hate when our heroes get old. You know what? Peyton Manning is a better quarterback than definitely more than half of the league. And I'd say he's still a top 5 quarterback, regardless of your poo-hooing or anybody else's poo-hooing on the man. In this weekend, you're going to see him. You're going to see him light these Raiders up like you never have. The Raiders are giving up over 300 yards passing per game and 2 TDs passing per game. They even let a guy like Jay Cutler look good last week, which is really ridiculous. So you start Peyton Manning, you start Demaryius Thomas, and I actually think the better play over Demaryius Thomas will be Emmanuel Sanders this week because he'll get the lesser coverage and he'll end up getting the bigger plays. And definitely start Owen Daniels. Through 4 weeks, the Raiders have given up 6 passing TDs. Owen Daniels will make it 7, and definitely start your Broncos defense against. They're the cream of the crop. They're probably the best defensive unit out there, and maybe the Cardinals could make an argument for being the second, but we'll see. Broncos running backs, Ronnie Hillman, C.J. Anderson. I don't know that I like those guys this week. I know there's been all this hype about Ronnie Hillman getting more touches and being more productive than C.J. Anderson. But you know what? Being more productive is still not outstanding. It's good. It's okay. Makes for low RB2 flex status. But, neither of them get me excited. For the Raiders, I like Latavius Murray this week. The Broncos are giving up the 14th most fantasy points to the position, which means he can do better than the 90 rushing yards they allow once he gets into the passing game, and he could easily score a touchdown. Amari Cooper's going to have a tough go of it this week, but I don't know how you bench him just because he is a constant red zone threat. So for him to get 90 and a TD would be a good thing, so you keep him active. Michael Crabtree, if healthy, he's still being targeted enough to be worthwhile, 68 to 80 receiving yards. And if in a deeper league, 14 to 16 teams, if you need help, Marcel Reese, I could see him doing some damage, especially in the passing game. But the Broncos should just romp the Raiders. Pete Manning will look like a stud.
All right, we're in crunch time now. So the 49ers at the Giants. Look, the 49ers are a mess. But the one thing they do well is run the ball. 5th in the league at 130 yards per game. But guess what, kids? It's the one thing the Giants do really well is defend the run. They're at home. Look, do you count on Colin Kaepernick to be able to take advantage of a suspect Giants passing defense? I don't. I'm taking the Giants at home.
Yeah, Keith makes a great point here. And I think at the end of the day, if you have Carlos Hyde for the 49ers, it's tough to – I could see playing him and I could see trying to bench him. If you have a better running back with a better matchup like TJ Yeldon, I think would be a better running back this week over Carlos Hyde. And the only reason I say that is Carlos Hyde – he's active in the running game, and I can't really say he's very active in the passing game. It's almost like Reggie Bush is a better sort of sleeper in this instance because the Broncos, despite giving up just 70 yards on the ground, are giving up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. That means if you can throw to your running back, you can do some damage against these Broncos. So take it for what it is. If you've got Carlos Hyde and that's the guy you want to go with, go ahead, but understand that he could very well be limited. You can't like Colin Kaepernick anymore. He just looks like a guy who's shell-shocked, which makes it hard to play Anquan Bolden, Torrey Smith. At best, they're wide receivers 3s. wide receiver 3s. For the Giants, you got to love Eli Manning against the defense, giving up the 12th and 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers, respectively. That's 260-plus yards as well as 2 TDs per game. Give Rashard Jennings a start. He could easily go 100 yards and score this week, as well as Shane Vereen. I like his possibility of doing something out of the passing game, with the 49ers giving up the 7th most fantasy points to the position. And Ruben Randle certainly makes for wide receiver 3. Giants win. Oh, Giants defense. Start them this week, too.
All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers travel to the San Diego Chargers. The Chargers and Steelers both 2-2. The Steelers starting Michael Vick, who did not play all that great last week and missed a couple plays that, even though Josh Scobie kicked himself out of a job last week, he still could have saved the day. Vick is not Roethlisberger. We all are aware of that. But the Steelers' defense, middle of the road in both categories. The Chargers do not defend the run very well. That does not bode well facing Le'Veon Bell, who is very quickly cementing his place as the best running back in the game. As we speak right now, they give up a lot of points, and the Steelers just don't seem to right now. I know Phillip Rivers is great now, but San Diego is banged up. They got injuries on their injury report right now. We're looking at Stevie Johnson, Malcolm Floyd, Brandon Flowers, Orlando Franklin, King Dunlap, Jacoby Jones. There's just a lot of talent missing. I'm going to take the Steelers on the road here.
Oh, there's no way. You stick with those Chargers, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Steelers team that without Ben Roethlisberger is missing a very important part of its offense, and it will underperform. Phillip Rivers last week, without 3 of his starting 5 offensive linemen, threw well for over 200 yards and for multiple TDs, and I expect very much to be the same this week. He's a borderline top 5 start in fantasy football. I love Keenan Allen. I think he's going to be one of the top 5 wide receivers this week, and if in daily fantasy games, I think you got to give him a start. And guess what? He gets back Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates should be easily a 60 to 80 yard receiver, and he should get into the end zone like nobody's business. And I love Danny Woodhead. This is a Steelers defense that's just pretty downright bad. They're they're very susceptible to the pass, and I was really stunned last week when Joe Flacco didn't just demolish them. But it's been very apparent that Joe Flacco in the past has many times not lived up to what it is that people think he will do. Now, let's not poo-hoo the Steelers all that much, because Le'Veon Bell is a stud. He's a must-start. He's the number 1 start amongst all running backs. Antonio Brown is a stud too, but as you saw last week, you kind of got to keep your expectations in check with Michael Vick, the quarterback. You just can't necessarily believe that Antonio Brown will put up the kinds of numbers that he did with Ben Roethlisberger. Martavis Bryant comes back and give him a wide receiver at 3 start, but keep your expectations in check. And Heath Miller will be a better play this week than last, just because he'll be able to get off the line instead of being stuck there blocking. Michael Vick, a lot of people are really high on him, and I think they're high on him because they believe Le'Veon Bell will have a huge game in the passing game. I just think that that's something that until the proof is in, until you see it, I just wouldn't believe it. Michael Vick was very underwhelming last week, and was whatever people's expectations were for him last week, he was much less than even those. So I'm taking the Chargers at home big time.
All right, real quick before we go, 3 running backs. You need to choose one. Melvin Gordon, Matt Jones, or Darren Sproles.
Ew. Wow. None of them, I think, are good plays this week. I'd probably stick with Melvin Gordon, if only because, the Steelers are susceptible in the ground game. He's a player that can only get better with each passing week. If I had a second choice, it would be Darren Sproles, because I could see him getting involved in the passing game. And the reason why Matt Jones is number 3 is, besides being behind Alfred Morris, with Chris Thompson sort of battling for touches, it's just a huge question mark. I mean, he could be boom or bust, and I'd rather avoid that situation.
All right, and with that, we are out of time. That is it. Week 5 preview is in the books. For Jim Sarantias, the Fantasy Greek himself from thefantasygreek.com. I am Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. We're here every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time at Late Night Sports Radio. If you're catching this on demand and you still have lineup questions, you can either tweet to the hashtag AskTFG or head over to thefantasygreek.com. Get yourself a Skybox membership and get all the up-to-date rankings and adjustments and news that you can handle. Be a champion. Don't be a fool. Have a good week, everybody.